I've had it. I've bloody well had it. This is happening absolutely too much. We got to deal with it. Right. It keeps on happening. We keep on having these bizarre rush launches that make absolutely no sense from, I mean, really anyone's perspective, even the long or short, or sometimes even, or medium, or sometimes even short term perspective of the company. The two most obvious examples in the right now, of course, Matt, are the Callisto Protocol, which came out with a silly stuttering issue and some other stuff in PC that just didn't make any sense, and probably a situation where the game was pretty much death marched into existence, and I think especially from some of the latter parts of the game, could have done with quite a lot more playtesting and refinement, let's just say, and Darktide, a game that it shipped with like a quarter of its crafting feature set. They say they're going to have some more of the crafting feature set within like a few weeks, which then leaves you thinking, why'd you not just wait a few weeks and actually release the game properly? And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. It's because they were really silly and they didn't use today's sponsor, Brilliant, who are going to help me survive Russian roulette. Brilliant are the best way that you can learn new STEM fields, improving your prospects and bettering yourself. And it's all via their fantastic site and app. First 200 click my link, get 20% off. Now, we learned a lot about probability last time. This time, it's time for some Russian roulette. This is not exactly the applying math to real life that I had in mind, but hey, we do call out a lot of CEOs in this channel, so I better be ready for anything. Now, jokes aside, their modules on Russian roulette are actually a fantastic, tad dark, tad spicy, bit of fun way of learning. It's an absurd situation that's underpinned by maths that often we find very counterintuitive. And understanding the counterintuitive is what lets us see things clearly when others are led astray. I mean, hey, I love Mac's ocular pat down and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And hey, if you're understanding probability via Brilliant, you can look at the world around you and give it the ocular pat down because you're good at probability. Our own cognitive biases are what can lead us to not see the world objectively, and razor-sharp probabilistic thinking will save you time, it will save you money, it will earn you money, and it will put you on an upward trajectory. So don't just sponge in boring facts, learn by doing with brilliant.org/Bellular News. First 200 to click my link, get 20% off their annual subscription. Okay, thanks for helping us pay the wages, and now let's actually get into it. So, right, the first thing we've got to talk about, though, is some of the companies actually realizing this is a really big mistake and we cannot do it again. And I think in light of the extremely sparse launch lineup from Microsoft, more relevant, because Phil Spencer has, he just admitted at Xbox, are now far more willing to delay games after the launch of Halo Infinite.
Well, at least they've learned something from that, that's for sure.
Shame about Halo being shot and so many developers having an awful experience.
Well, yeah, I think that's probably why they're like, okay, what did we do wrong? Should we not have launched this game? Oh, okay. It's the idea that I think you never really learn from your mistakes until the mistake is a proper kick to the jaw. And I feel like Halo was one of the biggest kicks to the jaw you could probably ever do to Xbox. Yeah. The only thing worse would be like Starfield launching and not selling inexplicably.
It's almost as insane as something like, say, Blizzard messing up World of Warcraft. I mean, could you imagine that? Wouldn't it be daft?
God, I mean, no way.
So, to go into what Phil Spencer actually said then, he basically just said, now it is at some level because I have shipped games too early. We have experienced shipping games too early. In hindsight, when you look at a game like Starfield, it's taken too long and so much investment in a new IP from the team. The decision is to give them the time to build a game that they basically to do it right. This is, of course, in light of both Starfield and Redfall being delayed for up to half a year. He said there are financial implications to those decisions, weighing what is going to happen, whether it's platform growth, subscriber growth, or frankly, the revenue generate when a new game launches. Those are business decisions. You definitely have to weigh the outcome of those decisions. And perhaps they are looking at Halo Infinite and saying, this, even long-term, this was not worth it.
Yeah, would another 6 months, another year of paying developer wages with no income, would that have made that reach our expectations? Because I'm assuming a lot of this comes from them going, hey, Halo team, we expected X amount of money. Why do we have 25% of that? Could you explain? And then someone at 343 went, because the game wasn't done enough? Do you not see that? Is that hard to understand? If the game was better, it would have made more money. We would have needed more time to make the game better. And then someone went, is that it? Nothing. tell us that next time. And then the 343 employee goes,
Yeah, I think people have no idea how much or how often games are kind of launched, in spite of the protests of seething engineers and designers.
Whereas obviously, like, most people who are like watching this will go, oh, but isn't that obvious? What's that Shigeru Miyamoto quote? We'll get to that. What's that quote about the games being good eventually? Like, can y'all just wait and release the good game? Because a good game makes more money than a bad game. And it's that thing where it's like, there's just like the horseshoe of thinking, where it's like, that sounds really simple, but I guess Occam's razor, that is simple, it is correct. Just make the game better for it. That's how it goes.
To go into why games, so we're going to do the why, if more time will even help, and then there are notable things to talk about, even going as far back as Half-Life 2. Talking about money then, so there are financial implications. Number one, it will leave a gap in your financial calendar. You could end up with a more competitive launch window that could impact, projections. I mean, games don't get delayed to fight Call of Duty. They get delayed away from Call of Duty. That's just how it works.
They go from the is this going to be out in October? No. Okay, well, we can't launch you in November. And we can't launch you in December. Well, November because Call of Duty. We can't launch you in December because that's Christmas and Call of Duty. We can't launch you in January because all of the other games that didn't want to fight Call of Duty are released in January. And we can't put you in February because the tier of game below that has been delayed to February to not fight January's games, which won't fight Call of Duty games. So now you're releasing in April and we have no money. Shit.
Well, that's the thing. November almost extends to March now.
Yeah.
Which is quite mad, but it is happening.
If you look at 2023's releases, it is just Marches where everyone went, we'll do that instead. And you're like,
There then are other things, right? So let's just take marketing. So you'll have things that you've locked in that you have a contract for. Breaking that contract might cost a whole bunch of money. Yes. Also the thing of a whole bunch of teams internally and externally being dicked around. So all of that is a part of it. Even the likes of storage. There's lots of very mundane, boring logistical things that, they'll impact different businesses to different degrees. A lot of the time then, the delays are just not really the control of the developer. A publisher's commitments could take precedence where they will go for what is shippable. I'm very glad that, like, say, our situation, our publisher has just been, oh no, we just want a good review score. So, that's the goal, which is lovely. But I do know it absolutely is the case. A lot of publishers are not like that. Take an example, Team 17. They're a publisher who, for quite a time, were criticized for just their games are coming out too early. They weren't really done. Things weren't really going good. From some of what I understand, they have now realized that this was definitely quite a mistake. They grew too fast, they got too ambitious, they maybe got away from some of their core visions, and they kind of went back to the normal. But certainly for some of the teams who were caught up in that ended up being a pretty damn terrible situation. So many intricacies of working with a publisher, I think, that just a lot of people don't really appreciate, and you shouldn't have to. You shouldn't know how the sausage is made to actually enjoy eating the sausage, and certainly there are some times where the sausage is actually tastier if you don't know how the damn thing was made. A lot of this then is just the outcomes of the game launch versus the money, and often the thing can just be, we need the money now, we can get new money later, we don't need to delay. But then the problem is, eventually you get a Call of Duty Vanguard, you get a Halo Infinite, where you have just kicked the quality can, not even the quality can, there's some form of can, you just kicked it down to the road to the point where your IP foundations are crumbling.
Yeah, you've kicked it into the middle of the road, and another game or another service has run over the can and destroyed it. More or less. That's what I think just sort of happens.
So now to go to a common industry catchphrase, which is misattributed to Shigeru Miyamoto, about, of course, the late game and the bad game's bad for the rest of its life, which then modern publishers come in and say, ever heard of a patch? And it all gets ruined. Of course, not good for customers.
Thanks,
this is a thing that's broadly misunderstood, because delaying a bad game will not make it less bad when the game comes out. It will make it slightly less bad, because it depends on the form of bad. Good example, Pale Beyond, it's being delayed. It's being delayed so that we can really have the perfect cherry on top, and so that we have launch timing that we feel confident in. It's not being delayed because, oh no, the endings aren't done, only 30% of the game's done, and now Thomas has got to work 80-hour days. Not, like, literally not happening. Our art team are actually working on other projects, which means that the launch of Pale Beyond is going to be absolutely easy and cozy. Like, even if there does end up being a day one patch, there probably will be. It'll be a day one patch you wouldn't really mega need, because we'd assume anyway, because raw games like in really good shape. But there's then lots of games where it gets delayed because it couldn't ship now because it doesn't work. You can't run it. It'll make your computer explode. And that is something we've seen quite a lot. There's also the problem then that a game with design flaws or divisive gameplay is not really going to be saved by just having a incremental delay, because that's when a game instead is maybe going to need a rescope or a reboot. And it's one of the problems then where if, and this is the thing that I've noticed happen in so many games, just talking to people and just talking around, where people don't ask for their delay early enough. So instead of doing a preparatory delay, as in, okay, look, I've foreseen a problem. I think shit's going to hit the fan in 9 months. We need another year and a bit. Versus the shit's just touched the fan. We're screwed. We need a delay for 4 months right now. That's fundamentally different, because if shit's hit the fan and you get a delay, you are trying to pick pieces up so that something is shippable. If you are doing a preemptive delay where stuff's not on fire now, but you sense it will be soon because you have good foresight, that is the sort of delay that's going to lead to a great game. Instead of one that's going to lead to a death march that's going to erode your company's morale and at the end of the day have a releasable piece of shit.
Yeah, there's a couple of I think games that really speak to that idea of being completely busted and there's no time is going to save it, and that'd be like something like Final Fantasy 14 1.0.
Yeah,
where it's like, no, you should have. I mean, obviously, in hindsight, it worked out okay. Might have saved the franchise because of basically miracles, but fundamentally, you know, they probably should have looked at that project halfway through and went, "What is any of this? Throw this in the bin and start again, you absolute melts." But they're like, whoops.
Yeah, the Shadowlands is a great example.
Sunk cost fallacy, yeah.
World of Warcraft Shadowlands got a 1 month delay. That was not to fix any core problems.
That was to make it work.
Yeah, that was to make the damn thing work and not be full of, all the bugs and issues. Now, if Shadowlands had have had a 4 month delay that was secured by the developers in the summer based on beta tester feedback, then we could have had a situation where Shadowlands would have came out looking a bit more like post-patch 9.1 Shadowlands, where maybe even the ripcord could have been pulled. But, we've since learned that Blizzard had these very locked-in development cycles for these games where lots of things are just too set in stone. And ultimately, that was a situation where delay couldn't save that game. We needed a transformational delay, not a we need to not be wholly fucked delay. And to transition us on then to the games that really should have been delayed, but weren't. Yes, and the most obvious ones, based on the breaking news or the recent news, I'd say is Callisto Protocol. So here's a funny thing. The Dead Space remake is coming out in January, which means there's not that much, that's a bit rough. If you delayed Callisto Protocol too much, then you could be worried if you were a big biz exec that, oh no, the Dead Space is going to come out, we're going to be killed.
Yeah, what is our product position that is marketing? It's the Dead Space you don't have? Well, we can't release the Dead Space you don't have after they get a Dead Space, because then they'll have a Dead Space and won't want our game instead. And you can see why that's obviously a very simple way to look at it, but you kind of go, yeah, sometimes you might have to just release a bad game and hope it's okay, or hope that they can be salvaged later, because if people buy it now, as so many games have highlighted, mostly unfortunately, games release and people buy it and go, well, this is shit, I hate this. But then it's like 2 months later and everyone goes, in hindsight, the week 4 patch solved most problems and it was okay, and it didn't get refunded that much, because I think people vastly overestimate how much refunds actually happen. I think a lot of people buy a game and get annoyed and then go, bastard, I'll wait for it. I would do better, I think.
I obviously cannot share anything, but I do have actual financial models from a publisher that do include refunds. No. Refunds are actually way more impactful than people think.
Interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, refunds are a major part. So they are a major part to the degree where making a 2 hour long experience is a pretty bad idea.
Of course.
In the same way that some people, here's a few quid. It's just like the equivalent of a movie in terms of length. Hope you enjoy it. And as I'm sure you could imagine, the way there's some things are better done as a TV show and there's some things that are better done as a movie. There's lots of games that right now, the platform rules of Steam literally tell developers, do not make this. You'll get 40 or 50% refunds and you will be screwed.
Jesus.
And that is totally bad shit. Which, I wish that Steam maybe had more sort of rules there, or just a way that could both protect consumers and allow for different formats of length. Because you don't want a game that should be 2 hours and awesome to be 4 hours and padded and boring, as an example. But for another game then, we got Darktide, which, by the way, brilliant game. And I said I was gutted and pretty sad about it. And that's because I'm really sad it kind of happened like this, because they would have had one of the greatest games in that genre in one of my favorite pieces of IP. And it could have been the most clear, unambiguous win. Yet it does seem that after 3 delays, they had to put the game out far short of being finished. And I think that's obviously a situation where, with both maybe the perspective of Tencent and Fat Shark, game needed to come out, need to get this money.
Yeah, obviously.
Which you hear that from Tencent and you're like, what?
That's a bit, yeah.
By the way, yeah, Tencent are, Tencent, Fat Shark, big investment there.
Yeah, it's weird. It seems a little bit against Tencent's MO, but at the same time, if they're starting to, like, if you want to invest, you want to see your money back.
Or maybe Tencent are just hands off and that was Fat Shark's own L.
I mean, it very much could have been. It could have been maybe like a Cyberpunk kind of situation where they're like, is this an L? It won't be that big an L. We'll just fix it later. It's fine. People will be okay with it because they like the game. And then the release, and it was like, this is worse than you expected. Sorry about that. Kind of shit just hits the fan when something launches. I think, that's one of the frustrating ones where I think a lot of that was bolstered by them just going, hey, we'll fix it. Don't worry. Please don't refund it. Please don't tell your friends it's shit. We'll play it and pre-order. You faithful fans will get the shit version, and we'll take all your feedback, and you'll be kind of very late beta testers, and we'll fix it. We'll fix the super core problems, and then when it hits full launch, everyone will be happy and it'll be good. And then it wasn't, and then they go, I just keep making. We'll just keep fixing it. Please have patience. It's
the realities
whole,
can be pretty horrific. And the next one then kind of gets a little bit closer to us with Abermore. Very small indie game, a dev team that includes people who made like 10 Second Ninja X. Basically, immersive sim where you're planning and executing procedurally generated heists, which, I mean, come on, sounds awesome. Very ambitious, very innovative, also broken as hell on launch. Part of that's because of just the incredible ambition of the game. Also material realities where the developers said that when the game launched, that's also where, out of necessity, it's actually the same week the game was announced, most of us started other jobs, and that means they won't be able to support the game the way that they think it deserves. And that's the rough thing, where indie teams are sometimes in positions where, the band has to break up because they need to pay the rent. And it cannot be like the end of the Pick of Destiny movie where you can have a battle with Satan and then he'll pay your rent for you. It just doesn't work like that. And I guess I do have the example where it hits a little bit more close to home. I mean, there's plenty of times where I will say substantial amounts of my savings have ensured that the games company here doesn't explode and not exist. Yeah, so basically the way that it will, and some of that is, from, I guess, my company to the games company, and some of that is me personally to the games company. But it's one of those things where if with the pale beyond, it's like, we can't actually make cash flow for 3 months. Sorry. Here's a great example, actually.
Game never happens otherwise.
I recently had to put like 25k in, and and it's fine, I'll get it. And it wasn't me personally. It was like, our structure stuff, not important, but basically,
yes.
Tax credits. So the tax credits are, I know people hear them in the stories about how, it's, Rockstar being silly, but the tax credits for many indie developers are an absolutely vital form of getting revenue in. We did all of our cash flow planning with the regular timeframes for those tax credits. And no, tax credits haven't came through. I actually went to another, a local accountant who works some other game companies in the country, and he's like, tax credits haven't came through for my companies either. And it turns out HMRC they're just behind, or I don't know if it's HMRC or the BFI or whatever, but they're literally just behind on issuing those payments. And this is months late. And this is money needed for fucking payroll. Yeah. Now, imagine you are a self-published indie and you've worked out all your cash flow and all of that, and suddenly you realize I either have to do early access, either have to rename version 9.5 to version 1.0 and launch the game, or, there'll be no money. We'll actually have to get people on our team to go and get other jobs and then work on this in their evenings, which obviously means the game can't be fully supported. And that's the situation that happened with these developers. Turns out it's not about the total amount of money you can bring in. That's definitely important, but also the cash flow of it. And I can tell of numerous times where us having a, revenue positive YouTube channel has been absolutely essential to games company existing, because sometimes shit just doesn't get paid in time. And it's like, what the fuck, man? You can't be 2 months late with money that's literally people's wages that we need to make payroll, and then you have to do the equivalent of breaking into the fucking bank of mum and dad. And you're like, what the hell? But this sort of thing happens with indies. Now, it shouldn't happen with Fat Shark. It shouldn't happen with Callisto Protocol. But for indies, like if you're ever wondering why an indie game comes out and, it's compromised by a few things, often it's stuff like this.
Yeah, it's like basically the whole reason for early access existing.
Yeah.
Is that idea of, obviously people say, oh, it's to get early feedback, and that is true. Look at how it worked for like Hades and Darkest Dungeon. That went swimmingly, but a lot of it's also we promise we'll finish this, and you can kind of trust us, because you can sometimes trust us if we're a big name indie. Sometimes you can't. There's too many early access projects that just completely abandoned because it was just a way to get money in easy. But the fundamental point was, can we take the money now? We'll take your money, we'll finish making the game. You're kind of buying the game in advance. It's like a Kickstarter, but you get a demo, almost basically the same thing, but via Steam. And that's kind of seems to be how it works. And some places, like, it seems like Fat Shark did that kind of intentionally, where they're like, this game isn't, we don't quite call this early access, because that would have a lot of connotations, but it's where the line between early access and live service blurs.
Yeah. Well, I sure as hell prefer, and certainly when I think about some of our future plans, if we want to self-publish, I'd far rather do early access in a Kickstarter, because the way that would work is it'd be like, okay, hello, Northern Ireland screen, here's X money, can we get Y money? Okay, now we got the pot together, let's make the thing for early access, let's publish it, and at least that way, whenever a user goes to potentially buy our game, there's a thing there with reviews. And then, whatever those reviews are, consumers have actually, they're armed with knowledge, versus Kickstarters, which I think we've now seen fall off in popularity. And because do you remember back in Kickstarter, it was like all the, oh wow, look, the Ouya is coming, consoles are being disrupted, there's new games popping up everywhere. Oh wow, and Anthony's coming back, and then look,
Mighty Number 9, what an amazing game! I love it to pieces.
Yeah, and I suppose I did just mention Japan, and that's where we've got to move on to a game that many people will say came out too early, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. 5
years too early, to be honest.
Yeah, and I'll say, game came out too damn early, and it's really sad because your partner's a massive Pokemon person. It is actually, in many ways, a good game that has plenty of upgrades over the general Pokemon experience. It is leagues above Sword and Shield, and there's a lot that should be going for it, but it is just so infinitely compromised by its technical state. So we think about why this happened then. Why did that? How would this happen with Pokemon? Well, okay, let's go into that. If you delay the game, what happens to your card game expansion? What happens to your tie-in anime? What happens to your humongous number of moldy plushies? There's designs to be sent off, factories to be contracted for all the different development windows. And if one game gets delayed, oh no, now the whole yearly machine has fallen off the rails. Basically, multi-year, multinational, massive process with dozens of stakeholders all being involved. And that essentially means that the only thing that will delay a Pokemon game is it literally not working.
Even then, I'd be surprised, honestly. I feel like there's someone at the Pokemon Company will be able to hand someone at Nintendo a large enough block of money. That's definitely nothing to do with the insider training of Square Enix. Similar vibes.
No.
It's just going to be handed massive block of money aside. Because we've seen it happen with Sony before, with the verification process. Where it's like, hey, Sony, I thought when games crashed your console, you weren't allowed to release them. Why did Anthem come out? And why did Cyberpunk come out? So you imagine the same would happen with Nintendo. Like, this doesn't work. So like, we shouldn't release it. Suitcase of money. Okay, we'll release it. Don't worry. It's fine. You could imagine even that happening because it's so important. It's so big. It's one link in this massive chain of everyone making a shit ton of money at every single step of the way. It's like, and obviously Pokemon, of all things, can definitely take a few PR hits. Because
audience was...
They are a very captive audience.
They're beaten into submission.
Yeah. It's brutal how much, there's so much writing in that and whatever. Fine. Obviously Scarlet and Violet got reeled, but didn't stop it selling. Not a bit.
No. And then you look at Cyberpunk 2077, which is another time. We'd almost call it a scratch card of a delayed game and it's No Man's Sky is kind of like one of those too. For many people, Cyberpunk as an actual game with its narrative and all of that, it's brilliant. They really love it. But obviously the public narrative was one based on how destroyed it is. And that does mean that as the company fixes all those problems, the true game gets revealed. And for many people, it's actually a winner and they really like it. And then the story turns positive. Though I suppose it's also, much like with Diablo 3, a situation where, but you're only getting one expansion. Whereas maybe if it came out with without that chaos, you would have got 2 expansions. And it is a continuation of this thing where, as consumers, it just feels like everything that we really like comes out. I'm not saying half-assed by the developers, but comes out half-assed and broken. I mean, imagine if you like The Witcher. You get The Witcher TV show where you're basically, seemingly the only things that it seems to get are how characters are horny and good portrayal of Geralt, and everything else is a total fucking... I mean, goddamn, a lot of people who talk about production of shows have many things to say about how bizarrely Witcher seems to allocate its budget. The way Witcher, especially season 1, is just freaking weird. And then, fucking Blood Oath, which is really bad. And how did you spend this much money on a script that is this terrible in terms of like basic macro narrative structure? All of these bizarre things that seemingly make no sense. It's one of those things, honestly, that's creating a counterculture. And it's a counterculture that's going to have pros and cons, because now every new thing is treated with skepticism. And it does mean that some of that joyous, fun, I suppose, love and happiness and reverence doesn't really happen anymore. The people who say that on the internet, they're just like, oh yeah, you're a cuck soy boy. I think that's how they sound. But that's what people will say to the person who's like, oh, I'm really excited about the new entry in the IP that I like, because so many people have become so crusted and jaded and angry and joyless and full of the absolute opposite of fun, because they've just been betrayed again and again and again and again and again and again and again. Yeah. And I think within gaming, we continually are just seeing it happen so much more. And the reason why this video exists is because I was really excited for Darktide and I was really excited for Callisto Protocol. And I remember I just came into the office and I'm like, can we just have an excuse to talk about how goddamn exasperated we all are that this bullshit keeps on happening? I mean, the most crazy thing that's happened in our lives is that, yeah, it definitely had some bugs, but like Dragonflight came out and it wasn't shit. Yeah. Isn't that surprising?
Sure is.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's like,
but that
in
happens,
a way,
yeah,
feels all the richer because we are so used to every potential thing that we might like will be bad. Mass Effect Andromeda.
Yeah. Yeah, but then the reason Dragonflight isn't an absolute nightmare hellscape mess is because Shadowlands was, and that had enough of an environmental impact. I mean, maybe it did economic impact at Blizzard to go, listen, we're really pissed off. We will not buy your next game if it's like this. That was like the audience general feedback, and they went, "You're serious this time? You won't buy our game?" Shit. We promise the next one will be good. We actually mean it this time, and then it was. It's like, that's what you would sort of expect to happen. Because obviously, well, I mean, I don't think maybe it did face a delay that we didn't know about because they didn't announce the date. Like a lot of companies are starting to learn to do. Hello, Xbox and Sony. But it's that idea of hopefully this stuff does have an impact.
Yeah, and I guess that's the thing. We do like to turn it around and actually have a hopeful message, because honestly, a lot of our goal in this channel is to turn anger into understanding and understanding into a measured view of things, so that the cycle of anger and cynicism can be broken, be that through games being better because we are, along with many other people on the internet, I think it's just the thing of everyone doing their part, trying to build a coalition for reasonableness. Kind of went off my point, but you get my point anyway. Yeah. It's to try to at least transmute things into hope where there can be some, to shine a light on some of the better things. So, as you said, when you think about this, there's so many companies that are now delaying the hell out of their games, and they're seemingly doing it earlier than normal. Yeah,
that's been my entire experience recently, has been, oh, my game's been delayed, or where's my game? And then it eventually comes out and I'm like, oh, sweet. It's like, well, Final Fantasy 16 got a delay. I'm like,
good.
Sure, great, wonderful. Forspoken got a delay. Absolutely. And Walker got a delay. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm not doing anything else. I'll just play other games.
Re-record all the voice acting for the whole game.
Yeah, it's not a problem. It's just like, oh yeah, this game's been delayed. You're like, good. Please do more of that. I will trust you if you're admitting your mistakes and going, okay, well, that was maybe kind of wrong of us. There's this almost like all of the stages of of bargaining, or whatever, the stages of grief and acceptance. I'm just like, yep, is Silk Song ever going to come out? I don't care. As long as Silk Song comes out before I die and I have time enough and the mental acuity to enjoy it, sure, that'll be fine by me. Is Metroid Prime 4. Where's Metroid Prime 4? No one knows. No one's seen it in 500 years. It was the most anticipated game from people in 2017, 2020, 2022. Where is it? And now I'm at this point where I'm like, you can have all the time in the world with it. You can release it in 2027. I do not give a shit. Because if you don't, it's probably going to be terrible, as all of these other games have proven. I'm not at the stage of full acceptance and hope. It's like, video games that come out soon are bad.
Yeah, that's our message. Anthems are less likely to happen because they don't work. The next Battlefield game is probably going to be a lot better considered, because we've consistently shown them that not listening to people, being pig-headed and launching things too early makes it fail. We all banded together against loot boxes, and now we all have battle passes. Shit. But hey, you got the point.
A few more steps, a few more cycles, and we'll be free.
That's
I hope.
It. And when you look at games that have been delayed, Blizzard quality, I think Blizzard quality, it less comes down to them being uber giga-chad developers. It comes down to them delaying shit because they had a lot of control over their company back in the day.
And they also had infinite money, so they got to go, do we need to release this? They just checked the bank account, went, we've got a couple of years. Keep it.
Yeah.
Work away. Obviously, that change with Activision, but until then.
Yeah. And so that's the thing. It's not that they were the best devs in the world. It was that they were willing to hone and refine for a very long time. StarCraft 2, development started 2003. Wings of Liberty came out 2010. During that time, it was delayed for some resources that had to go to WoW, the removal of LAN services, and development and support of Battle.net. I always love it when you're watching a really, really tense, LAN event, and then there's a internet-based disconnection. Happy. But in that time, they rescoped the game. The campaign actually got split into 3, with Wings, one for each race. But the point is, like, StarCraft 2, awesome game. To me, a 10 out of 10. And it benefited from that delay. Half-Life 2 is another great example. It was announced in May 2003. It was then supposed to be released in September 30th of that year. And back when Jeff Keighley was a games journalist, so I guess this is a bit pre-Dorito Pope, we're going to launch it at E3. We're going to ship it in September 30th. Newell emphatically states that didn't happen, Then it turned into holiday 2003. It wasn't ready. Basically, a whole bunch of things happened. Newell had to fess up to a delay. Things went down poorly. The game's full source code was just yanked. That revealed that the game was definitely not ready for launch. Man, that whole Half-Life 2 story was kind of crazy. It's the sort of thing, if it had happened now, like, so many more eyeballs would have got on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, whole big thing. The game eventually comes out, of course, in November 2004. Massive delay, but it ends up being, one of the best games ever.
It's insane to say that about, like, the shooter from 2004. Like, yeah, no, it is impeccable, and that delay is likely what made it impeccable, because you could imagine how, definitely wasn't bug proof. I think all of the physics segments maybe one of the chapters, can't remember, but whenever you're in the hoverboat, and it goes a wee bit skew sometimes, but even then that was like characterful enough. But do you imagine how shit that game would have been if, like, the physics puzzles just didn't work half the time, and how awful it would have been if lighting wasn't finished and things were just there, the mob spawns for, like, I can't remember the name of the spooky place, weren't all in there, but they were. The game was impeccable.
People saying the same thing about God of War Ragnarok, void of information. Where's things? Scory Barlog. When it's done, no sooner.
Yeah.
And the thing there is, and it all leads us to the lessons here. So, the smartest and best lesson of all is that all you need to do is be an industry-entrenched developer with a lot of money, a publisher that matches that, releasing a sequel in a beloved series where you can afford to take the time because you're guaranteed sales. That is when you can always delay your game. Great, you save the industry. And that ultimately ends up being the problem. Because time is money, money's time, etc., etc. Annualized franchises, well, what happens if you can't knock the entire machine off the rails? You have smaller developers who literally need food. What are they going to do? All of these issues. So that obviously means that it's money versus time, and it's all of that versus what a publisher thinks they can get away with. And I guess that is where we come in as consumers. So when it comes to the level of individual developers and their own stories, then there can be a very direct developer to consumer relationship that, in many cases we not hear about them because they're smaller, but within, like, more niche communities and stuff, they work really well. But overall, we need to really ensure that publishers don't think that they can get away with it.
Yeah, that's you go back to the infamous Modern Warfare 2 boycott.
Yeah.
Where you go, people have to actually hold themselves to that. And that's the thing where it doesn't work so much in mass gaming most of the time because the sales will happen. But that's where, like, I mean, this is a bit starry-eyed and hopeful, but isn't that where the whole, like, media industry is supposed to exist, or the whole, like, press industry is supposed to exist? And we're supposed to be able to, like, as a unique group of, like, niche consumers, go, like, I guess, punch above our weight using media, using the press, using PR to fight and go, listen, this is some bullshit. Stop letting these people get away with the bullshit, please. And that's largely working. That's why, like, the legislative angle is so good. Where it's like, you look at, like, whenever people step over the line with the loot boxes and stuff, and you release a Battlefront 2, and then you get big articles going, what is this doing? This can't be right. So it's like, hopefully getting the same there. Holding publishers to the impeccable standards across the entirety of, like, niches, and holding that and using whatever platform you have availability to communicate with, and going, don't do this, please. And then when they do it again, we're no longer asking, do not do this. That's the power we hold as consumers. And it's evidently sort of working. And obviously it's working, like, very slowly, but that might even be them trying to, like, maximize profits. Where it's like, will they make enough money from releasing a game early and busted and people buy it? Yeah, but you can only release so many games a year without being Embracer Group and releasing every game ever all the time. So there's that beautiful thing of, I think they're starting to learn, in order to min-max the money we make, We have to do a good job and make a good game.
It's surprising that we're even saying this because it seems like the most self-evident bullshit.
I mean, I think that's where a lot of us get frustrated because we look at the publishers making decisions and go, how much money? What's your salary? Why are you making like so much money when you ask someone in the street, hello, do you release the good game in a couple of months or the bad game now? And you can explain some of the finances or explain some of like the fact that a game takes so many years to make or else. And I imagine like 8 out of 10 people go, well, the good one's going to sell more, right? And then you go,
and do you know what's crazy to me? So much of this happened in an environment where inflation rates are nearly 0%. Basically meaning money's free.
Money's free.
Like, you could raise some debt to delay your game. It's not that hard, especially if you're a large publisher. How can you not do that? The cost of capital is so goddamn low. Even on the, incessant funding circle adverts that I get a few years ago, like, the cost of capital was so cheap. As long as you, like, what? I think that's what like confused me the most. And to be honest, even though our goal of today's video was to explain why these things happen, it's kind of hard to explain because it does feel so inexplicable. The only one that I think we could reasonably explain to people is the Pokemon one, where you've got the anime, the massive wave of merch, you've got the card expansions, and you have it being an annualized franchise. That's just something where if one game is knocked off, how long does it take you to get back on schedule? So that's kind of like that with Pokemon. But for so many of the rest of them, the main example for me is Darktide and why that did not come out finished. Especially if you're trying to do it as an ongoing live service. Like if you're going to invest your time into a live service, you have got to know that that is a stable platform that you can invest your time in. Something like, a Deep Rock Galactic maybe.
Yes.
Where people are like, Deep Rock Galactic? That is solid as fuck. I will put my money there, or time there, or, Path of Exile, where it's just solid. And I guess that's where it's confusing to me, because like if Fat Shark didn't have enough money, like they could raise around. I'm sure Tencent would probably be willing to give them some more money. They could probably raise around from somewhere outside of that. That's the bit that confuses me. I honestly don't get it.
Yeah, I always assume there's some like series of people making decisions. It's not like one person going, should we delay this or not? Yes. I feel there's like a load of people going, there's a lot of effort to delay it. Go ahead. I imagine there's loads of really small reasons that add up, and no one with, the big picture is sitting going, just delay it. Just use your brain, delay it. And then release it was good. And then you have people say, this game's good, go buy it. I think that's maybe how they should reframe it. When releasing a game, because obviously there's the whole like Cyberpunk thing of like people being like, no, it's fine, and not understanding the scope of the issues involved and stuff. But there is fundamentally just a part of go, what, when your game comes out, Mr. or Mrs. Publisher or whatever, would you like people to say, don't buy that, it's not very good, it wasn't finished? Or would you like them to say to their, let's say, anywhere between 10 friends and 10,000 Twitter followers, go buy this game, it's pretty good. Like, which one of those do you want? Answer that question and then decide accordingly. If you have a solid principle in mind, you'll find a way around all the problems. Even like you were saying, go find more money. Go dig up the back of the contact couch for money if you're a publisher. Like, send 10-cent email, fire us another like 20 mil, we'll probably get like 25, 30 mil back instead. You're like, sweet, seems like a deal. Maybe. Who knows? Probably.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing maybe it is that some of these projects go so bad that all of that happens and it's still not enough.
Maybe, yeah.
Like that's the other thing. Like I do know of projects that it's like 2 million. No, it's not.
Oh, this is the whole.
If you want the game to actually come out with another 2.5 million, sorry, you're like, what? Yeah. You need double your what? Yeah. But yeah, that happens.
I have this whole, and this is an insane thing to say, so I'm going to keep it very brief. But I have this whole weird idea of, the way they constantly want loads of developers across every massive thing. I feel like it might just be there's a lot of developers who are like put under pressure that they can't actually deal with because they're just going, you're a new developer in the industry or whatever else. You've got all this responsibility, and they're going, I guess that's how it is. But the like status quo of what a developer is expected to do is way too much, and then it fails, and then no one understands why, and it's kind of go, must have been something wrong. But I think that's like a day of like they're just putting too much weight on inexperienced developers, likely, honestly.
Yeah, it's probably just a lot of bad management.
I mean, it isn't everything we talk about boiled down to management bad? Is it like an individual stupid decision from someone in the lead, or is it a series of like production issues because they just mess things up along the way?
Spencer here using like basic tenets of management and leadership. Yeah. In one of his comments, one of the things I've learned is that you want teams to feel like they own their dates. They deliver better when they feel like they own their own destiny with their games. So you wait for a real signal from creative and production teams. Phil, that's completely correct. I don't know why so many mistakes happen. I don't know why this is fundamentally not listened to as much in a world where money has been cheap, but perhaps now, in a world where money is expensive and things are harder, maybe the cost of getting it wrong is higher. Maybe the examples of how not to do it are more numerous, and maybe that could lead to a more reasonable, if less timely, gaming experience, which honestly is one that's better for all of us.
That's why, in principle, and I've been saying this for a long time before the channel started. I've been saying this since like maybe 2011, maybe 2012. I've been saying, when's the next video game crash? Because we need one. So people in the industry go, oh, we shouldn't be doing that. Whoops. Obviously, it's a bit hyperbolic. It's a little bit like, burn it all, raise the ground and build fresh is maybe a little bit drastic. But sometimes it feels like that's like the principle of what we need. We need some shit to go so badly wrong that people go, oh, sorry, we were asleep at the wheel there for a second. Let's actually create video games properly as management teams and production people, as opposed to developers, because most of the time developers are trying their best because they're passionate about their job.
Yeah, it's chaos. So look, what do you think? What's the most recent game where this has happened, where it's screwed you over? I do want to know. And also, where's Skull and Bones? Did it get delayed again?
Oh my God, Skull.